theyeshiva.net.
So our next speaker is someone I have not personally met, but I do know Shlomi felt deeply connected to him. More than that, Shlomi deeply admired and respected him, and he spoke of him all the time. He's one of America's premier Jewish scholars in Torah and Jewish mysticism. He is one of the most sought-after speakers in the Jewish world today, lecturing to Jewish and non-Jewish audiences around the world. He is considered to be one of the most successful, passionate, and mesmerizing communicators of Judaism, culling his ideas from the entire spectrum of Jewish thought and making them relevant to contemporary audiences, just like Shlomi did. It's no wonder why Shlomi loved you so much.
YY Jacobson always used to say that I can quote Reb Nachman, Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Kook. Without that meaning, I'm less of a Lubavitcher, because the Rebbe was big enough to encompass and knows everyone's great.
To me, the depth of that message speaks, yes, to the Rebbe's greatness, but it also speaks to Rabbi Jacobson's. His appreciation of Shlomi's diversity and interest in what was different is testament to his expansiveness of thinking and openness to the world around him. It is my honor to introduce Rabbi YY Jacobson, who will speak about the unique soul of our dear Shlomi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the illustrious and kind introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I see we have very large crowd here. Thank you, my dear friend, Reb Yosef Schaefer, for giving me the schus and the privilege and inviting me to this milestone and this bittersweet occasion. Bitter because we mourn the loss of Shlomo of Bundi, of blessed memory, and sweet because we remember him. And when you remember him, it almost forces a smile out of your lips. Bundi was one of a kind, as they say, a unique character. And, when I think of him, there's just a certain smile that comes into my soul. And that's why I say bittersweet. My relationship with Bundi begins quite a few years ago, as I was privileged to serve as a rabbi and teacher in congregation Beis Shmuel in the section of Brooklyn. A few minutes ago, you heard from the founder and president and leader of Beis Shmuel to this very day, and beloved friend Moshe Pinson. And I'm going to begin just with making a shout out to Moshe, because he was really there for Bundi through thick and through thin. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. Moshe, you're here. I want everybody to give an applause to Moshe Pinson. Bundi went through different stages in his life and struggles. And Moshe was a real friend and mentor and guide to Bundi. I'm sure there were others as well, but Moshe I just know from my years in Beis Shmuel. And Bundi appreciated it very much. And we all appreciated it. So I still hear today from people, as you just heard from Reb Yosef Schaefer, my friend, that when people listen to my classes on video or recordings, MP3s, the years in Beis Shmuel, there's always somebody interrupting. They want to know who's always interrupting. So the editor did cut out a lot. Yosef, you think he interrupts me now? You have to know how it was before the editing. Before the edit now, it's every few minutes. Before the editing, it was sometimes more often. The editor, before posting it, made it a little more smooth. But who is this fellow? There's a lot of sikhs that we'd have a Sunday morning shir and look at these sikhs for many years. And a lot of it is on the web, on the yeshiva.net, and people hear it and they comment to me years later. Who's this guy? Questions. History classes. Any shiurim on the Parsha, on Yom Tov, on history topics, on Maimorim, on Sikhis, on any themes in life that we used to discuss, relationships. There's always one man, young man, who interrupts very interestingly. Doesn't just interrupt, to hear himself. Asks questions that are very unique. And of course, it was the unforgettable Bundi Freundlich. I don't know if there was a shir that he missed. I can't remember. but very, very rarely. He had to have a good excuse. I don't think there was a shia that he missed. And there were a lot of shiurim, morning, early morning, late at night, very late at night, fabrengens that went to the wee hours of the morning. And he was, I'm not going to say always there, but almost always there. And always with questions that other people wanted to ask, but were too ashamed of asking. Bundi would ask everything. He took nothing for granted. He was an inquisitive soul. And whatever I would say was up for questions. First of all, got a date wrong, forget about it. Bundi was there to confront it. Who knows dates? You think somebody knows? Once you hit the 1400s, nobody knows what hit them. Even if you hit 1700s, nobody knows what hit them. Usually once you hit 1980, nobody knows what hit them. Right? Bundi, 1311? But last week you said it was 1211. I would say a date and you would say, but 5 years ago in your sermon, you gave a different date. And I'm like, OMG, where do you find these people? I had to be so accurate and meticulous. If they said the wrong page number, I believe that when you teach, you have to always give references, dates, years. I'm a strong believer of that. I'm a believer of it because I've heard enough speeches of people where there's no historical reference. There's no historical context. And it drives me crazy. You know, there's some people, by them, the Rambam, the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe Rashab, David HaMelech, you know, we're all more or less living in the same 20 years in Crown Heights. You have to have perspective. Jewish history is very long. It's thousands of years. Bundi had perspective. He understood that. And if I got a detail inaccurate, he was there immediately to confront it. Not only that, I wasn't allowed to repeat a speech. Listen, let's face it. I'm in the recycling business. I can't come up every Shabbos with new revolutionary ideas. It's recycled, you know. Story here, avarti, and inside there. Not with Bundi. It was like, so now you put it in Parshas Re'eh. But 4 years ago, somehow it made it into your sermon Acher and Shal Pesach. But I see what you did. You took a story here, you changed the story there. And there was no shame. And then there were other questions that other people wouldn't ask. He would ask questions that are obvious. He wasn't afraid to say, this whole thing doesn't make sense from the beginning. Bundi would also ask, after a sermon, he would come over and he would ask questions that other people would think, but they wouldn't ask. For example, you know, he could say publicly, so Rabbi Jacobson, how does your ego feel after you just got a standing ovation? Most people don't ask that after a speech. You like that? Yeah. How does your ego feel? Are you insecure? Are you covering up for your insecurity? How long did it take you to prepare? Do you believe what you said? He could come over to me and say, Rabbi Jacobson, do you believe what you said? I don't think you believe anything you said. So in a very interesting way, I found it very refreshing because it was raw, it was naked, it was authentic, it was honest, it was very real, it was refreshing. He often kept me on my toes. If I made a mistake, he would jump on it, and he would ask the obvious. The Rebbe used to say in Fabrengens that klotz kashas are the best questions that nobody asks. Klotz kashas means stupid questions, but really they're excellent questions. The Rebbe would often ask questions on a Rashi, and then the Rebbe would say, and now a klotz kasha. Klotz kasha means like a kasha of a klotz. Klotz means a piece of wood. It's like a foolish question. The Rebbe would say these are the best questions. We call them foolish because we have no answers. You know? So that's what the Rebbe would often say. And it was very interesting to hear that from the Rebbe. And Bundi was an expert in klotz kashas. You know, the questions that nobody asks. But for me, as a teacher, as a speaker, as a communicator, it was extremely, extremely refreshing. It was innovative. It was raw. And it was good to hear. It was good to hear. He would not let me get away with anything. Anybody who davened in Beis Shmuel or came to my shiurim or even hears the recordings knows that I did not get away with a free lunch. everything was challenged. If I quoted something wrong, if I even said it a Gemara, or the wrong Gemara, the wrong page, he called me out on it. So either in the middle of the speech or after the speech or Mitzvah Shabbos, I got a call or a text, or the next day it was an announcement. By the way, Rabbi Jacobson, wrong reference. And it became ultimately very endearing because it was Bundi. Bundi was Bundi. Other people might have annoyed me if they did it. But Bundi, it was Bundi. It was forgivable. I want to share with you an interesting moment that Moshe Pinson is my witness. It's going to be, some of you will think, it's not such a real story. And if Bundi would hear this, he would say, you really? You're making it up. But Moshe Pinson is my witness. I think he saw this together with me. I'll still remember this. It was Shabbos HaGadol, Yud Nisan, a few days before Pesach, quite a few years ago. I don't remember the year exactly, but quite a few years ago. Bundi had a makam kavur where he sat at my speeches. I used to give long sermons, and he had a place right against me. He would sit in the corner. During davening, he was taking care of the crowd and being hospitable to everybody. For my sermon, he would sit down, and he had a permanent place. So he sits down there, and he's sitting. And I spoke then. I don't remember what I spoke about. I think it was about Jewish pride, Shabbos HaGadol, Jewish dignity. I think I told an interesting story about a Harvey Swadis, a famous Jewish writer who came to see the Rebbe in 1962. I think that was it. I'm not even sure. And it was about Jewish identity and knowing who you are in life and making peace with yourself. And as I'm talking, Bundi always came across as a cynical person. Not cold, but cynical, because he questioned everything and everybody. There were no holy, there were no sacred institutions. Challenge anybody and anything about anybody and anything. And I mean that seriously, which I personally didn't mind. I actually liked it. But he was not, the type who would get swept up in an emotional speech. He would retain his distance, and he would sometimes even tell me afterwards, what's this propaganda? Or manipulating the crowd. The crowd with emotions. He was very frank with me, privately and publicly as well. But suddenly, I see Bundi is weeping like a baby, sobbing. I didn't know why. And every word I was saying was triggering more emotion. I never saw him cry. And he wasn't just crying. He was sobbing, sitting there, and tears were streaming down his eyes. I wasn't talking about some very emotional, tragic situation. I was talking about emotional stuff. I sometimes talk about emotional things. I think I spoke about Jewish history a lot and Jewish identity. I spoke about the Second World War, the struggle of the Jewish people. I spoke about Hannah Arendt. What was her name? Hannah Arendt, the philosopher. I think that was the topic. But he was just sobbing. I didn't know why. I asked somebody afterwards, I think Moshe Pinson or maybe somebody else, maybe Shmuley Kupston, I don't remember. Why was he sobbing so much? I didn't know. I went over to him. And he didn't answer me. Mitzvah Shabbos, we found out that his father passed away that Shabbos. And it happens to be, I asked Moshe Pinson what time his father passed away. He should find out. And he told me it happens to be literally the same moments while I was talking. And he just started to sob. And then I realized something very, very deep. It was like something that happened to his soul at that moment. Maybe unconsciously, he felt that his father's soul passed away. Because there was no rational explanation. This wouldn't happen at my speeches. But it was something that stayed with me. Which brings me to another very, interesting, I think, and powerful quality about Bundi. And that is, he was an extremely non-judgmental person. I know Moshe Pinson just mentioned this a few minutes ago. And it was extremely refreshing. We often look at people with a certain lens. We frame them. And it's really our own insecurities. We protect ourselves. It was extremely open. There was no such a thing, with him I'm comfortable, with you I'm not comfortable. The type of person I can get along with, this person I can get along. This person is material, this person is spiritual, this person is religious, this person is secular, this person is too extreme for me, this person is too liberal for me. He didn't view the world. Every person had that infinite dignity and complete openness to who you are, what you bring to the table of life, and what light do you bring to God's world. And it touched him in a deep way. He really saw humanity as part of a cosmic symphony, and each one of us an indispensable note in this divine symphony. And it wasn't just cliche and words. He really experienced the world that way, which is why he was comfortable with, I think, every single type of person from the entire gamut and the entire spectrum, with literally no distinctions whatsoever. This is something that is extremely refreshing. Bundi also had a certain simplicity to him. Things were black and white. There was a certain simplicity about life. You would say something, he took it very, very literally. I know of a plumber, he called him up 3 o'clock in the morning to come fix something in the house, a pipe. The plumber says it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Bundi says, on your card, it says that you are available 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day means 24 hours a day. Bundi was something literal. And also his amunah, there was beyond his sophistication. He had an amunah pshuta. He had a certain simplicity. And it wasn't a contradiction. He could be sophisticated. He could question everything. He can be inquisitive. But there was also a certain conviction, a certain faith, a certain simplicity. There's an expression in the Rishonim that's brought in Chassidus, Ani mispalel ada zahatinek. When you daven like a child. You have to be like a child. You know, a child is black and white. There's a simplicity there. Bundi had his challenges. Bundi was a unique neshama, but at the end of the day, you know, some people, it was difficult for them because of the different challenges. At the end of the day, he had a purity to him. He had an innocence to him, and he had an idealism to him. He was idealistic. He would always say to me, so you really believe that there's, like at the end of a speech, so you really believe that there's truth in the world? Or you just fake that there's truth? And ultimately, are you also manipulating everybody? He craved for innocence. He yearned for idealism. He had an idealistic soul. We would learn Chassidus. Now, you know, Chassidus is very, very spiritual. It's pristine. And he didn't always understand everything intellectually, but he sensed, he had a smell, holy energy. When there was holy energy, he like felt it. It resonated with him. It touched him in a very deep way. And he knew when to back off and when to attack. Like he can smell a sacred moment that you don't have to challenge, because he could challenge everything and everybody. But there were certain moments and instances that you can see. It was a sacred moment. There was also Bundi and Reb Shlomo was a soul that's not a regular soul. You all know this, anybody who knew him. These are souls that are planted in this world. They're on their own journey. They have unique gifts and challenges, resources, virtues, vices. Like each and every one of us has our vices and our virtues. But Bundi's soul was also an alarm clock. It reminded people. It reminded people about innocence. It reminded people about honesty. Reminded people about authenticity. Reminded people about the need to be genuine and the need to be able to strip ourselves from layers and garments and facades and masks, and about the courage to be able to be non-judgmental, to be able to cut other people's slack. Now, you know, there are two types of people who are not judgmental. There are people who are not judgmental because they don't care. If I don't care, I don't judge you. I'm in my own orbit. I'm quarantined in my own cocoon. I really don't care. I don't judge you because I don't believe in anything. It's not a big deal. I don't judge you because I don't have positions, because I don't have convictions. because I don't have any strong values. So why should I judge? Everybody is good. That's a superficial lack of judgmentalism. It comes from not being part of the fabric of life. There's a much deeper form of non-judgmentalism. Deeper form of non-judgmentalism is the profound ability not to allow God to become stuck in your limited orbit. The ability to always challenge yourself to transcendence. Bundi understood what is Yiddishkeit? It's a daily battle for transcendence. It's the daily attempt to be able to go out of my insecurities, out of my ego, out of my trauma, out of my skeletons, out of my orbit of scars and wounds that make me petty and make me small, so that I could become more expansive and put on lenses that allow me to see the infinity within a person by seeing the infinity within the world. And Bundi had a certain chush for this. I don't know if he would articulate it this way, but this is how I'm articulating it. His presence enriched my life. His passing impoverishes all of us. Bundi, since I believe that the soul is always present, especially at a Shloshim, the day of commemoration. So I'll speak also to Bundi directly, soul to soul, neshama to neshama. Say, Bundi, thank you. I don't know if I ever thanked you explicitly for all of the challenges, the stimulation, the questions, the curiosity, the fact that I always knew that there's somebody listening to what I'm saying and not sleeping. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to be accountable. So thank you. And thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your love. Thank you for the positions you took. And thank you for the commitment that you had, for the convictions that you embodied. And that despite your life not following the trajectory that many of us are accustomed to, and your life not being so simple on many levels, nonetheless, you tried hard to live life to the fullest, to make people comfortable with Judaism, make people comfortable with Chassidus, give people an experience of a Shabbos table, make sure there's lively conversation. And yes, not everybody always appreciated it. Some people thought you were obsessive, you were too literal, you were too demanding, you sent them too many texts, and I understand that. I know what it means. Nonetheless, you have brought light to many people's lives. You have made people comfortable who otherwise would have never been comfortable. You have brought people in and gave them a feel of home that they would have not had otherwise, without judging anybody. And that was a unique skill that we should all, I think, and could all learn from Bundi. First of all, don't be afraid to be curious even after you hit 45. Remain curious. Reb Nachman said we become old when we stop telling stories. Bundi never got bored of telling stories. Remain inquisitive, curious. Never become stuck in any particular orbit. Never become confined by how you were yesterday. Allow yourself to be fresh, to be creative, to start all over again. Allow yourself to be original. I'm going to conclude with a word from the Kotzker Rebbe. Bundi he probably heard this from me and he probably loved it, but I don't remember for sure. The Medrash says that a person's life, you go through different stages, almost like an animal. It says, when you're born, you're like this king, everybody adores you. So then you're 2 years old. The Medrash says this in Koheles, you're like a pig. You're in mud. You're getting dirty all the time. Then you're jumping around like a goat. Then he says, when you're 20, you're like a horse, beautifying yourself to attract the women. And then you get married and you become a donkey. Just schlepping. I got into the tug, schlepped and schlepped and schlepped. And then he says, you become like a dog. looking to survive. And then the Medrash says, and at the end of your life, when you get older, you become like a monkey, like a chimpanzee. But then why? Why like a monkey? Why like a koif? Why? So the Medrash says, because a koif, a monkey, starts imitating people. Okay? A monkey imitates people. So everyone understands the Medrash. When you're like a Zaydi, you're 70, you start imitating your grandchildren and making faces, to entertain them. The Kotzker Rebbe said some incredible insight. He says, when you get older, you know who you start imitating? You start imitating yourself. You start copying what you did throughout your youth. You don't have the courage to reinvent yourself. You just become a copy of who you were yesterday. You're a monkey because you're imitating yourself. There's no originality in your life anymore. You're not ready to expand your horizon, to rethink things. You become stuck in the quagmire of your comfort zone. Bundi was not that way. He was ready to rethink. He was original. He was creative. He was open. Because he was open, he was also very non-judgmental. He was curious. So I pray for all of us and for all of you. And I say, Bundy's song was interrupted at a very young age. But may we, you and us and all of us, continue his unique melody and light in this world through our lives. And as a result, perpetuate the love and the light that he brought into the world. They also offer profound condolences, sympathies to his mother, who's with us, to many of his siblings who are with us, to his relatives, cousins, and close friends from Avos Yisrael, from Beis Shmuel, from Crown Heights, from all over the world who are with us. And I really, really am saddened by his loss. We'll continue his love and his life in our own lives and be able to challenge ourselves the way he would have liked to continue to challenge us each in our own way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.